helicopter was running 300 feet above the canopy when something hit it from below. Conrad Wells felt the impact in his body before his ears caught up. A heavy, wet thud against the belly of the aircraft, like a huge palm slapping the hull. Not a missile, something that meant to make contact. The aircraft sagged. The tail swung left, then dropped. Doyle, in the operator's seat, got one word into the headset, and Conrad lost it in the static that punched into both ears at once. The rotors went into the crown of a tree, then wood and metal and glass went up around them, and there was a stretch of time Conrad could not account for. He came to in his harness, hanging at about a 40-degree angle to the ground. The cabin was on its right side. The blood on his face was not his own. He moved his toes inside his boots, then his fingers. His neck worked, which was the first good news of the morning. The second came when he released the harness and dropped onto the door beneath him without breaking anything. Doyle was hanging 3 feet from him. The way his head sat on his shoulders told Conrad everything he needed to know. He did not check for a pulse. He climbed out through the shattered windscreen and came up on his side next to the fuselage. The morning was clear, around 7:30 a.m. local time, first Wednesday of May. The forest was second or third growth, young oak and hickory, sky visible through the crowns. He stood still and ran sectors before he ran people. Training was running ahead of thought. Position first, then who was alive. Terry Ackerman was face down about 30 feet northwest of the wreck, in a posture the wounded do not hold. He had been thrown clear and had not rolled afterward. He had landed and stayed where he landed. Conrad walked over, checked the 2 places where a pulse should have been, and got nothing. Brian Salt was still in his seat, still strapped in. His head sat wrong on his shoulders. Conrad did not linger. Lucas Pierce was beside Salt. Conrad gave him 3 seconds. Pierce's eyes were fixed on a point that was no longer there. Ray Goldstone was under a section of instrument panel. Conrad lifted it, looked underneath, and set it back the way he had found it. Jenna Foster was under the tail section. That one took longer, because the tail had not come down on her completely, and for a while Conrad believed he could get her out. Then he stopped believing it. He stayed with her longer than he had stayed with the others. He put his hand on hers and held it there for about a minute. Then he stood up. That made 6. He counted twice, because the first time he had counted himself by mistake. The satellite terminal sat in a hardened case that had come out of the aircraft almost intact. He opened it and powered it up. The display lit white and steady. Signal was good. The bird was overhead. Every channel showed nominal. He set a short test ping. The terminal reported the packet away. A minute later, it reported no acknowledgement. He ran it 3 times across different routing, and the result kept landing in the same place. He sat over the terminal another minute, looking at it the way you look at a tool whose purpose has gone soft on you. Signal was going out, only out. Nothing was coming back on that band. Conrad knew the effect from 2 reports he had read in the agency library about 7 years ago, both flagged restricted. At the time, he had taken what they described as theoretical. He was sitting inside it now. The short-range radio failed differently. It powered on, held charge, but even the noise floor was wrong. Too clean. As if something was holding the line quiet on purpose. He collected what he could collect without making noise. The agency pattern carbine, set up for a large, non-standard target, was in its individual mount inside the cabin and had survived the impact. 5 magazines, a sidearm, a tactical knife, a trauma kit, a filter optic, binoculars. 3 days of rations he could stretch to 5, a day of water in the bladder, a map of the sector in a sealed folio marked with a route that no longer meant anything. He did not bury anyone. It would have been loud and slow, and the duty desk in Springfield would not flag the missing acknowledgement for another 4 or 5 hours at the soonest. He did not have 4 hours. He did not have a clear picture of what he was sitting on either, except that he was not the only one using the area. He marked each body with a thin aluminum tag from the kit. That was the formal part. He said nothing out loud while he did it. By 9 in the morning, he was about 900 yards southeast of the crash, on rising ground that did not show the fuselage from the road or from the air. He sat with his back to an older oak, ran his sectors, and checked his weapon. He brought out the map. He marked the crash point and drew a 2-mile circle around it. Inside the circle, he marked 3 locations worth moving to. From those 3, he picked the one the wind was coming from, not the one it was going to. By 10 in the morning, he was working down the western slope with the wind in his face. By 11, he had stopped moving. Not from fatigue. The ground was telling him something, and he wanted to read it sitting down. The first print sat off the deer trail, about 20 feet into the brush. Heel up, ball of the foot driven deep into wet leaf litter. The stride from that print to the next was over 5 feet across. A human stride at full speed runs maybe 4. The toes were splayed. A bare foot. No shoe edge, no tread. He counted 6 prints across 30 yards before the ground went hard and the line broke off. The weight pattern was wrong for a person. People roll the foot heel to toe, and the print deepens at the ball. These deepened at the outside edge of the ball and at the 3rd toe, like something walking with its knees turned slightly out. The depth said the walker had mass. Conrad would have put it at 300 pounds, maybe more, distributed over a frame longer than a man's. This was not his target. He knew his target's gait from the file. This was something else. He sat with the prints and ran them through what he knew. The agency kept a working list of residents in this part of the forest. 2 species of interest in the Gasconade drainage, both filed as non-hostile and tolerated. A small Bigfoot family group, never put at more than 9 individuals across the last decade of survey. And a population pair, possibly a single line, of werewolves that had held a range here for at least 40 years. The agency had known about both. The agency had decided to know without acting, as long as the residents kept clear of the highway corridor and the campgrounds. They had kept clear. The arrangement had worked, year after year. These prints belonged to one of them. He could not tell which from the prints alone, but the size and the splay narrowed it down. Not the Bigfoot range, the other one. He moved off the trail and worked his way back toward the high ground he had picked at 10. He set the carbine across his knees and did nothing for an hour. Then he started to set up. The agency had a protocol for contact with semi-sentient residents. It was not in the field manual. It was in a separate binder you read once and signed for. The protocol was called passive parley. It was not a capture procedure. The traps used in passive parley were not designed to hold. They were designed to be found. A clear human-set perimeter, made obvious, baited with something that signaled non-hostility. The signal was the whole point. The traps were the language. He set 4 of them, 2 with the wire run loose so any pressure would slip it, 1 with the bait left out in the open, salt, and a strip of jerky placed on a flat stone. One with a piece of foil tied to a branch above eye level. None of them would catch anything. All of them said the same sentence in different words. I am here. I am not hunting you. Then he made his hide. A scrape under a deadfall, lined with leaves, with a sight line to the bait stone, and a back exit through a tangle of laurel. He ate a quarter of a ration. He drank twice from the bladder and capped it. He let the carbine rest across his thigh and did not sleep that night. Around 3 a.m, the forest got quieter. Conrad did not think of it as quiet, exactly. He thought of it as the noise floor dropping. Same effect he had recognized on the radio. The insects stopped working in a radius he could not measure, but could feel running outward from him. He kept his breathing even, and his hands where they were. Nothing came in the dark. It was still dark enough to need the night optic when he saw the shape at the edge of the laurel. He had not heard it arrive, which was the part that stayed with him afterward. The shape was not at his bait stone. It was about 20 feet to the left of the bait stone, off the line he had been watching. And it was sitting. Sitting was the part he held on to. A predator does not sit when it has a target in front of it. A predator that is unsure of what it is looking at also does not sit. Sitting was a third thing, something other than either of those. Sitting was somebody waiting to be seen on its own terms. Conrad did not raise the carbine. He raised the optic instead. The shape was upright on its haunches, forearms across its knees, head canted to one side. The proportions were wrong for a wolf, and wrong for a man, and they were the proportions the file had described. The fur ran short along the forearms and longer along the spine. The face was forward set, less of a snout than a canid would carry, and the eyes were holding ambient light back in a way that meant they were open and on him. Conrad lowered the optic slowly so the motion would be visible. Then he set the carbine down on the leaves to his right, on purpose, with the muzzle pointed away from the shape. The shape did not move for a long time. Conrad measured it in his breathing. 40, 60. Then the shape lifted its head slightly, looked past him, and looked back. It did this twice. Conrad understood it on the second pass. It was asking him to follow. He took the carbine when he stood up. He did not point it. He left the kit where it was, except for the water and a single magazine in his pocket, and he stepped out of the hide. The first dawn light was just starting to come through the trees. The werewolf stood up onto its hind legs and waited for him. Conrad had to remind himself, walking toward it across 30 feet of open leaf litter, that he was a man with a carbine, walking toward something that could take him apart before he registered the motion. He kept walking anyway. The werewolf watched him come. He stopped within about 10 feet. The face was the part he could not look away from once he was close. Not the muzzle, the face, the expression on it. He had seen that expression on people before. He had seen it on a man in a hospital corridor in Norfolk 8 years earlier, who had been told the wrong thing by the wrong doctor, and was standing there with his hands open and waiting. He had seen it on a translator outside Mosul, whose family had stopped answering her calls. It was the look of somebody who had lost too much across too short a span, and had not yet settled on what to do about it. He needed to call the thing something, just in his own head. He could not address it out loud. He could not write it down. But he needed an interior name, so that what he said to himself stayed coherent. He took the name from the man pinned under the panel in the cabin, because that man was no longer using it. In his head, he called the werewolf Ray. Ray turned and started walking, not on all fours, upright, hunched, moving with the long swing of a heavy body that knew where it was going. Conrad followed at about 6 paces back. After 200 yards, Ray adjusted his line and began heading west-northwest, down toward the river drainage. Conrad checked the sun, checked his bearing, and let himself accept that he was no longer working a search pattern of his own. He was being taken to a specific place. The choice of route had passed out of his hands at least an hour ago, and he had not noticed until now. They walked until mid-morning. Ray set the pace, and Conrad kept his 6 paces and watched the back of the thing he was following. The forest changed as they moved. The young second growth thinned. The trees got older. The understory pulled back. Somewhere around an hour in, Conrad realized he had not heard a bird in some time. He stopped to confirm it. He stood still for a full minute. Nothing in the air. Nothing on the ground either. Ray had stopped also, 10 feet ahead of him, and was waiting without looking back. They went on. The ground started to fall away to the west. Limestone benches stepped down toward the river drainage. The agency map carried a notation for this area, a shaded zone marked with a code that meant tolerated residency. Conrad had read the notation many times without ever standing on the ground it described. He was standing on it now. Ray took him along a bench, then down a cut, then along a second bench lower than the first. The cut was a worn path, not a deer track. Something with weight had used this route on a schedule for a long time. Conrad noted the spacing on the bedrock where it was bare. The stride was longer than his own by half. He did not say anything to Ray about it. He just kept thinking it. At the bottom of the second cut, the bench opened into a wider shelf under an overhang of weathered limestone, maybe 40 feet across at the mouth and going back into shadow. The space had been used by something for a long time. There were arrangements of stone along the back wall that were not natural. There were depressions in the dust that had been bedding. There were piles of debris in corners that had been kept in corners on purpose. There was nobody at the front. Ray walked in slowly and Conrad followed at his 6 paces. The light dropped as they passed under the lip. Conrad let his eyes adjust without raising the optic. Movement at the back of the shelf, against the wall. Slow movement. Several bodies sitting together, the way they sat together. He counted 4. Then he counted again and got 5. The 5th was small and pressed into the side of one of the larger ones, and he had missed it on the first pass. These were not the dead. They were what was left. The Bigfoot the agency had on file in this drainage carried a working population of 9 across the last survey. Conrad was looking at 5. He understood the missing 4 without having to ask, the same way he had understood the satellite terminal without having to read the report a 3rd time. 4 were gone. These 5 were what had not been found yet, by whatever had been finding them. They were not lying down. They were sitting against the back wall, arms across knees, in a posture that mirrored the one Ray had held in the laurel before dawn. The smallest one was tucked into the larger one's side and was not moving. The others were holding still in a way that was not the holding still of a hiding animal. It was the holding still of something that had decided hiding had stopped working. All 5 were looking up. Conrad followed the line of their eyes. They were not looking at the lip of the overhang itself. They were looking past it, at a specific point above the tree line, somewhere west of the shelf, somewhere that had to be visible from where they sat, but was screened from Conrad by the limestone above him. He stepped out from under the lip carefully, kept his head down, found an angle, and looked up. He saw open sky, patches of cloud, the tops of the trees across the drainage, maybe 100 yards off, still in morning light. Nothing else that he could put his finger on. He looked at Ray. Ray was watching the 5 against the wall. Then Ray was watching Conrad. The expression had not changed since the laurel. Conrad understood the schedule then. The target had not eaten last night. The target was due. He pulled back under the lip and crouched. He set the carbine across his thigh and opened the rangefinder pouch on his vest and ran the numbers he could run without leaving cover. The overhang gave him a 60-degree field across the drainage. The opposite slope was 120 yards at the rim, falling to about 80 at the river. The wind was coming up the drainage from the southwest, light in his favor. He had 4 magazines in the carbine load and the one in his pocket from before dawn. He had Ray. He did not have a plan beyond the next 30 minutes. He decided not to try to make one. The 4th day moved into the middle of itself. The light shifted, the cloud thickened and thinned. Conrad did not eat. He drank twice. The 5 against the wall did not move once. Ray had moved up to the lip of the overhang and was sitting in the shadow at its edge, watching the opposite rim. A little after 11 in the morning, by the position of the sun, the sound floor dropped again. Conrad felt it before he heard the absence. Same effect as the night in the hide, same effect as the radio. The insects gone in a ring he could not see the edge of. The drainage went still in a way it did not go still on its own. Ray rose to a crouch. Not aggression, attention. The target showed itself on the opposite rim. Conrad would remember later that the target did not exactly arrive. It did not come into view. It was on the rim, and a moment before that it had not been on the rim, and there was no transition between the 2 states that his eye had registered. He brought the optic up and put it on the shape. It was tall. Tall was the first thing that landed. The second thing was that tall was the wrong word, because the shape was not tall the way a tree is tall, or a man on stilts is tall. The shape occupied vertical space the way smoke occupies vertical space, in a way that depended on where you were looking from. The optic told him 8 feet at the head. His eye told him something different, and would not commit to a number. The shape was looking at the overhang, not at the Bigfoot inside it, at Conrad. It had seen him through the limestone, or it had seen him before it arrived on the rim, or it had been told by something Conrad could not perceive that there was a new animal in the drainage today. He did not know which. He just knew he was being looked at, and that the looking was not a search. It was a confirmation. The shape had already decided what he was. It had come to verify the decision. Conrad understood, in the same closed loop of thought, that the shape had also come to the wreck 4 days ago to verify a decision. It had not knocked the helicopter down to defend territory or to feed. It had reached up because it was curious about what would come back down. He did not raise the carbine. Not yet. The range was too long for a clean shot on a target he did not know the anatomy of. He needed it to commit to the drainage first. Ray moved without warning. Conrad had thought Ray would stay. He had thought wrong. The werewolf came out from under the lip at full speed and was across the open shelf before Conrad had even finished registering the motion. The shape on the opposite rim watched Ray come and did not move. The shape watched Ray go down into the cut and out of Conrad's line of sight, then reappear on the lower bench across the drainage, climbing. The shape moved then, not toward Ray, toward the overhang. Down the opposite slope, against the grain of the slope, with a stride that did not match the slope. Each foot found the ground without searching for it. Conrad called the call. He let Ray close the angle. He brought the carbine up to the shoulder and set the optic on the shape and watched it come down through brush that did not move when the shape passed through it. He confirmed the wind. He confirmed the elevation. He let it come to 70 yards. He let it come to 50. At 40 yards, the shape registered the carbine, looked directly into the optic, and accelerated. Conrad fired. The first round went where it was supposed to go, and did what shots do not usually do. It did not stop the shape. The shape took it in the upper chest mass, and the upper chest mass absorbed it, and the shape kept coming. He fired the second round at 30 yards into the same area and adjusted up on the third. The shape was inside the lower bench now. Conrad's count of his own rounds went away. His sense of time did the thing it does under contact, which is to widen and slow without losing any of its content. So that he saw the shape's left forelimb come up and saw what was in the left forelimb that should not have been in a forelimb. And at the same moment saw Ray come in from the shape's right side, low and going for the back of the legs. The shape turned toward Ray. The turn was wrong. It was too fast for the mass and too slow for the speed of the head. The two parts of the turn did not happen on the same timeline. Conrad fired the third round into the side of the head at 15 yards. The shape went down. It went down the way a building goes down when a load member fails. Not a fall, a loss of the principle that had been holding it up. It folded toward the slope and came to rest against the limestone. Ray was somewhere underneath it. The drainage stayed quiet for a long time after that. Conrad held the carbine on the shape from where he was. He did not approach. He counted his breathing back down. The shape did not move. The sound floor did not come back up. He waited it out. He counted to 1,000 before he moved. He approached at an angle that kept the carbine on the head and gave him a line back to the overhang if he needed it. The shape did not move. At 10 feet, he stopped and listened for breathing. There was none he could hear. At 5 feet, he stopped again and watched the chest mass for the better part of a minute. Nothing rose and nothing fell. Ray was under the left shoulder of the shape. Conrad could see one arm and one foot. He could not see the head. The arm was not moving. He set the carbine down within reach and put his shoulder under the shape's upper limb and pushed. The shape weighed less than it should have. He had been ready for something on the order of 600 pounds. He got maybe 300. The mass was wrong for the volume. He noted it the way he had noted the prints on the first day, a fact to come back to later. He rolled the shape off Ray. Ray was alive. The breathing was shallow and wrong, and the chest was not holding its shape on one side, and Conrad knew enough about injury to know what he was looking at without naming it to himself. Ray's eyes were open. They tracked him. Conrad sat down beside him. He put his hand on the side of Ray's neck, where the fur was shortest and the skin was warmest. He kept it there. He did not say anything. There was no language he and Ray had ever shared, and there was no language that would have done anything in that minute that the hand on the neck did not do. It took longer than he wanted it to. He stayed for all of it. When Ray was gone, he sat for another minute. Then he stood up and went back to the shape. He did the examination the agency would have wanted done, in the order the binder set out. Photographic record first, on the camera in the kit, all 4 sides and the head and the points of articulation. He did the photographs without thinking about them too hard, because thinking about them would have slowed him down. Then the close examination. The skin was the first wrong thing. It was not skin in the sense he understood skin. It was a layer with the texture of something cured. The color shifted slightly under his hand. The wound channels from the rounds were clean and not bleeding. They had not bled at any point during the contact. He thought about that for a moment. He kept moving. The right limb was the second wrong thing. He found it on his second pass over the body. He had not noticed it on the first pass because it sat inside the limb the way an organ sits inside a body, and not the way a tool sits on a body. He had to look at the limb for some time before he understood what he was looking at. It was some kind of structure. Not something that had been added on, something that had been grown there. It was wired into the surrounding tissue at points he could see along the inside of the limb. He was not a biologist, but he had 11 years of looking at things that should not exist, and he knew the difference between a thing somebody had put on a creature and a thing that had developed as part of the creature. This was the second kind. The structure had been built into the body the way a heart is built into a chest, and it was still working. He noticed because the surface of it was warm, when nothing else on the body was warm anymore. He held his hand over it without touching it and felt the warmth come up through 3 inches of air. He watched it for a while. After about 6 minutes, the warmth dropped off. After 8, there was nothing. He sat back on his heels. He understood it on the walk back to the wreck. He had not understood it standing over the body, because standing over the body had been the problem. On the walk back, with the carbine across his shoulders and the camera in the kit, and the satellite terminal coming back into range of whatever had been holding the band quiet, he understood what the structure had been for. It had been a signal of some kind. Either it had been sending the whole time, in which case something somewhere had been listening to it for the 4 days he had been in the drainage and was now listening to the silence where it had been. Or it had sent at the moment of failure, in which case something somewhere had received a final transmission 3 hours ago and was deciding what to do about it now. Conrad did not know which. The agency would not know either. The question was the shape of the report he was going to file. He reached the wreck a little after 4 in the afternoon. The bodies were where he had left them with their tags. He did not approach them again. The terminal woke up and held a channel and acknowledged him on the 3rd packet, and he sent the short-coded string that meant operator alive, target down, request extraction. He sat against the same oak he had used at 9 on the first morning and waited. The extraction came at last light. 2 aircraft. He watched them work the approach. He did not stand up until the second one was on the ground. The debrief in Springfield ran 3 days. The team that did the debrief was the team that did the debrief for the things that did not have a procedure. Structure in the limb 4 times across the 3 days, in 4 different ways. He told them the same thing each time. They knew he was telling them the same thing each time. None of them suggested he change it. The report went into a binder. The binder went into the library he had read out of 7 years ago. The notation on the file used the same code the agency used for the 2 reports he had read at the time and taken as theoretical. The code did not have an English meaning. It was a category. It meant something had been confirmed that the agency had hoped would stay unconfirmed. He took 6 weeks off. He spent the first 2 weeks at his sister's house in Council Bluffs, sleeping in her finished basement, helping her husband replace the gutters on the garage. He did not tell either of them anything. They did not ask. His sister had been an agency wife for 9 years before she stopped being one, and she knew the shape of the not asking. He went back in the 3rd week. The work he did when he went back was not field work. He sat at a desk in the analyst wing and read other people's reports and wrote summaries. He did this for 4 months. He did not request a return to operations. The desk in the analyst wing had a window that looked out at the parking lot and at an oak tree at the edge of the lot that had been there longer than the building. He looked at the oak tree most days. In the 5th month, a young analyst, 2 years out of training, brought him a file and asked him to look at it. The file was from a drainage in eastern Tennessee. There were photographs. The photographs were of prints. The prints were not the same as the prints he had read on the first day in Missouri. The stride was different. The depth was different. The splay of the toes was different. The category was the same. He looked at the photographs for a while, then he gave the file back to the analyst. He said the analyst should pass it up the chain with a recommendation for a survey team, and not an operations team. The analyst asked him why a survey team. He thought about how to answer that. He said an operations team would tell them something they already knew, and a survey team might tell them something they did not. The analyst took the file and left. Conrad sat at his desk. He looked at the oak tree at the edge of the parking lot. He sat that way for a while. Then he went back to work. While you were watching this video, a lot of work stayed behind the scenes. Almost everything here was put together by hand, frame by frame, transition by transition. The sounds, the atmosphere, the way the scenes flow. I wanted the story to feel less like something you're hearing and more like something you're standing close to. This kind of format eats up a ton of time. It's not the type of project you can throw together from a template and wrap up in one evening. Some parts I rebuilt 2 or 3 times, sometimes more, until I finally got that feeling of tension I was going for. I really hope you picked up on that. If the video landed for you, drop a like, hit subscribe, or leave a few words in the comments. That's not just a throwaway ask. It's genuinely what keeps the channel going and gives me the push to keep making new stories. And one more thing, an important one. Everything you just saw is fiction. Any resemblance to real events is coincidental, and any real places or details are used only to set the mood. This video was made purely for entertainment.